Welcome to Weekly Q&A with Steph, and I have my favourite accountant in the entire world with me today, Chris Hooper, who is going to be not ranting, actually talking about all of the gems that he has learned in his 20s as being an accountant. So welcome, Chris. For those of you who don't, or for those people who are listening who don't know Chris, which I'm assuming is not many, but in case you don't know Chris, give me the 60-second, what is Chris's mission at the moment in terms of accounting?
Look, at the moment, it's not going to change for the rest of my life. It is to simply change the accounting game forever. So that's kind of what I'm hanging my hat on, and that's what I'm in the profession to do. One of the ways I do that is obviously as the CEO of Accodex, in a way to kind of lead by example, but I also teach, speak, write, and obviously do stuff like this with you, Steph.
Yay! It's exciting. So tell me all about, you just spent the weekend at Startup Adelaide.
Yep.
You're obviously so active in the Adelaide community, the whole of Australia community, the worldwide accounting community.
Yep.
What kind of pushes you to do this?
Look, Startup Weekend and Startup Adelaide came as there was just a lack of sort of grassroots movement in the South Australian startup community. I had intentions of building my own sort of high growth tech startup at the time, and there was just an inadequate amount of tools and resources available to kind of help people on that trajectory, because obviously starting a small business versus starting a high growth startup, they're two completely different things. And the learning curve in the tech space is like that rather than like slow and steady. So I just felt this need, so far as my local community was concerned, to kind of, again, lead by example and then kind of rally the troops around this mission. And I mean, I'm quite happy to say that I resigned from the board of Startup Adelaide probably 12 months ago, and it's now able to kind of sort of self-propagate and continue on as a going concern without my direct input. So this was the first year that I'd actually rocked up and really had nothing to do. I was kind of a spectator. So just walking around, helping out the teams, but with no other responsibilities. So it was quite refreshing in that sense.
That would have been so much fun, I imagine.
Yeah.
Getting into a lot of mischief because you don't have all of the jobs that you're supposed to be doing.
It was good.
All right. So do you think at the moment accounting is just such an amazing, exciting industry to be in? Or do you think we've still got a little bit further to go until we hit that peak excitement?
Oh, I think we do have further to go. But that being said, I'm still super excited about the here and now. You would have noticed this as well, that there's a lot of sort of pessimism in the accounting space at the moment. I keep maintaining that there is no better time to be an accountant than like this day and age. And I'm just really excited about everything else that's coming forward as well.
Have to agree. I think this is just some of the most exciting times, certainly for me being an accountant, and I'm quite older than you, so I've had a few more years experience, but you know, it's just brilliant to be able to see what we can do to help clients and all of the wonderful new technology and the thought processes and everything that's coming together. And that brings me to why I really wanted to have this chat today. You wrote a brilliant article. I think it was just fantastic on this is what happened after I quit reading business books. And I'll put a link so everybody can have a look in LinkedIn. And I was fascinated just by the fact that something as simple as, okay, well, my thought process went from I read so much, and I'm going to come to how you did that, but I read so much, and then I've gone backwards and said, you know, I'm going to step back and I'm going to learn all these other different things. It must be amazing. Are you reinvigorated from a reading perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Just a learning perspective. Generally, I'm going out of my way to learn new things, learn new disciplines. And I'm getting that kind of Christmas tree effect where my brain's just being lit up again. Because what I've noticed probably last year, because I do gauge sort of my performance with respect to different areas, I was getting less and less enthusiastic about learning. And I thought the problem was me, but the problem was that I was basically just re-walking over my tracks. And like, I think you know, I was getting a diminishing marginal return for every additional hour I spent learning. And the reality was, because the material wasn't new, I feel like I've covered pretty much everything that can be covered in the business discipline. I've covered it all sort of, you know, inch deep. So when it came to actually picking up another book, it'd be like, well, this is kind of just a rehash of that thing that I read sort of 3 years ago, and, you know, no new information was being introduced. So yeah, it's been great sort of reading outside the discipline now, because all of this stuff is completely foreign, and I'm struggling, which is good.
And what impact, I mean, there's so many people, and you said pessimism, etc. There's so many people in the accounting industry who just say, we are so busy. Okay, we're just so busy, we can't do anything. What effect do you think reading outside this discipline and getting reinvigorated about learning actually has on your role as an accountant and your role in our whole entire industry?
So look, I will always prioritize my own personal development above sort of everything. I'm not sure if you had a similar experience, Steph, but I remember when, you know, I finished my CA, this would have been like a long time ago, but there was like, you know, this ritual burning of the notes, and everyone was like, yeah, I never have to study again. And I was just kind of looking, you know, at them during these conversations, just going, seriously? Like, that's it? That's the last thing that you want to learn for the rest of your life? And, you know, I just kept doing my thing in terms of reading books, but then I also got bored from a formal education perspective. And I think I was enrolled in a diploma of management within 6 months after finishing my CA. And I think since then I've done like the MBA, I've done the management diploma, a project management diploma, and then one other thing, can't remember, but like in those years, like I just kept piling stuff on. And now that I've gone into my 30s, I'm going, well, what's next? You know, is it a PhD in accounting, or do I actually need to move laterally into another discipline?
Which is quite exciting, because obviously one of the things that I say to people as they're going through uni and thinking about finishing uni is just don't stop, because once you stop, it's so much harder to get those wheels in motion again. And whether it's formal or whether it's informal, you just can't stop. So my big question for you now is, what's your routine? You've obviously crammed in an enormous amount of stuff in your 20s. Most people don't even do it in a lifetime. So thumbs up to you. But what's your routine? How do you get it all done?
Yeah, cool. So the extracurricular reading stuff, I'm a big fan of audiobooks because you can do that, you know, hands-free and still use your eyes. So like when I'm walking to and from the office every single day, you know, I'll get in 30 minutes either side, which is an hour. That's like an hour of reading every single day. So big fan of Audible. And then also the other part is an app called Blinkist, which is like book summaries or abstracts. Every morning, like first thing in the morning, I will just blast through. It'll take like 10, 15 minutes to actually read a summary of a book. I use that almost as a like filtering mechanism. So before I will commit to actually buying the book, either on my Kindle or on Audible, I will read the summary on Blinkist and go, okay, yep, do I like that? Am I going to bookmark it? Or am I going to go, yep, cool, thanks for the information, moving on to the next one? Because I found that last year I was spending a lot of time like reading, and I'd get 2/3 of the way through a book or an audio book, and I'd be like, I've heard all of this before, you know. You didn't need to write a whole book about it. You could have written me a 2-pager and I would have gotten the gist. So I've been a little more meticulous about sort of selecting books to sort of protect my time in that respect, because you can't just go to the reviews on Amazon and be like, yeah, cool, 5 stars, I must read this. You've got to sort of do a little bit of due diligence beforehand. So there's that part. I'm studying software engineering, like informally but formally, if that makes sense. So I've kind of like resigned myself, like I don't want to just keep enrolling in university courses, but I do want that sort of level of education. So at nights, I'm, you know, clocking between sort of 30 minutes to 60 minutes, just chipping away at that stuff with very much a practical focus. So the course that I'm doing is like, here's some theory, now put it into practice, which I have a lot of fun doing, and they've kind of gamified the process as well. So I'm all about collecting those badges. And the other thing is obviously time spent in the air. You know, I spend a lot of time traveling, as you do as well. You know, you're on flight mode. There's nothing else to do except read the stuff that you've got in your backlog or listen to the books that you've got in your backlog. So really the booster shot comes from when I'm in the air.
Yeah. And obviously having that routine, I mean, walking to and from the office, most people have to travel to and from the office either by car or by walking or by train or by something.
Yep.
It's just that dead time, isn't it? Where you can say, now it's not actually dead time. I'm going to do something.
Super productive time.
Yeah. Super productive.
Yeah, I've been using my commute as an excuse to read or to listen to books for the last 8 years. And then that's when I kind of realized that it's like, you know, adjacent to every degree, it was like, wow, I'm doing a bachelor's degree every 3 years relative to the amount of reading that I'm actually doing. And that's when I started getting real excited about the prospect of over my entire career, I could probably do 15 to 20 bachelor equivalent degrees.
Correct. And just if people haven't read the article yet, you're reading between 50 and 100 books a year.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a big ask. Do you have a list of all of those books that you've read over the years?
You know, I wish I did. I obviously do on my Kindle and on my Audible account. But then even prior to those things even existing, I had a whole bunch of stuff. I'm sure I could compile a list, you know, because prior to Kindle and Audible, I obviously had the paperback books. And then I had a whole bunch of MP3 or CD even. Remember those? My audiobooks were either on MP3, direct download, or they were posted to me on CDs, which I subsequently ripped 2 MP3s to put onto my Nokia phone back in 2006. So I could compile a list, but I don't actually have a thing, because it'd actually be really good if anyone's listening, an app that'll scrape my Kindle account, scrape my Audible account, and then all of that other stuff, and then actually start compiling that. But yeah, I've got to make do with what I've got, unfortunately.
Do you have any 1 or 2 business books that you always put on the reading list for your team or other people that ask?
Well, mainly for clients, right? The number 1 I recommend is actually The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. I'm sure you've read that. That response is usually from someone who reads it. It feels very rudimentary to me now, but the response I get from clients whenever I go, hey, go read this book, and then they come back and they're just whoosh, and I'm like, good, desired effect achieved. Because it's look, don't take my word for this, about this stuff. Go get it. Go get this book, and then come back next month, and then we can talk about it some more. So I feel like that is a good catalyst book in terms of getting people sort of hooked on this reading trajectory, especially if they're in business already. But I think my first one was actually Rich Dad Poor Dad by Kiyosaki when I was 16 or something like that. My mum was like, here, you need to read this. And that's kind of what got me down. That was my red pill, got me down the rabbit hole. And that's when I just started devouring a whole bunch of books after that book. Yeah.
Agree. I think the best thing I did when I was younger was I still did MS Readathons up until I was literally 20, just because, it was such a great revenue, tool to go to people. Yeah. This is such a good cause. Yeah. And people would say to me, we're going to give you $50 per book because you're busy and you're never going to get them done. And I would just smash it out of the ballpark. Just you need to pay. And everything that I read from kind of 15 onwards was either understanding people, understanding business. Rich Dad Poor Dad was certainly one of them. I think I've read every single one of Robert Kiyosaki's books across the board. But, it's really interesting. We did an exercise with our top client base in that I bought everyone the Ask Gary V book earlier last year, and clients are still quoting me things out of that book on the odd occasion, just because it's such an easy read and you can just do like a question at a time. So, you know, I think we take for advantage the fact that we're reading when our clients need all of this stuff. Our team is craving all of this stuff as well. It's really, really good to have that, you know, cross-discipline. So in terms of books, are you a book person or are you a blog person or are you both?
Honestly, I think I'm an audio book person. One of the things that I actually learned, and this was by doing a audio book called Accelerated Learning Techniques by Brian Tracy in my early 20s. This was just when I was starting the CA program. Honestly, I wish I had done it before university, because you know, going into the CA program, having done this this audio book, and I actually did it twice, it was that good, was I learned the meta learning, right? I learned how to learn, and I learned about how I learn, which meant going into the CA program was an absolute piece of cake relative to university, because like, I think, you know, in hindsight, I was still working full time. I had a board commitment that sort of took up about 10 hours a week as well. You know, plus I was still maintaining about 15 hours a week of reading outside of the accounting discipline. But then I learned that, you know, through that course, that there are different types of learning modalities. About sort of people like to read and write, people like to talk and then listen, and then people like to, you know, watch and do and all of that sort of stuff. And I found a whole bunch of tests about that, and I found that like predominantly like 80-90% I'm an audio channel like learner. And then, you know, reading all of this stuff about it, it's like, we'll often have trouble in traditional academic environments, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, cool. It wasn't just me, right? I needed this content sort of, because I honestly, I hate reading. Yeah, I hate reading. Like, I much prefer the, like just listening or going to conferences or lectures or that sort of thing. I remember like during uni, because, you know, after I, you know, did that book, I realized that in university, I wouldn't go to my classes or anything like that. I would just download the MP3 like lecture audio recordings, and then I'd just sort of sit, you know, in the closet at home with my headphones in, and then just basically download the entire contents of that course into my head. So I'm not a book person. I am definitely audio first, which means I suppose the blog equivalent of audio would be podcast, which I am a big fan of. So yeah, I mean, if you discount the channels, I think both are kind of equally sort of worthy in terms of the podcast v the audiobook. I like podcasts and blogs mainly because they're just short, concise. I'm a big fan of Harvard Business Review, both written and audio. They have a podcast called IdeaCast, which is just phenomenal. But then even the actual articles that they're writing, I will read. I've actually got a subscription to the magazine as well, because it's useful at like airports and on planes and stuff like that. So just because I learn better through the audio channel doesn't mean I don't read at all. It's just my preferred learning modality is through audio. I do find that books are often like better, of a better quality, mainly because, you know, the amount of effort and energy that actually goes into writing a book on the author's part is huge, which just means that it's of a higher quality, I think, in terms of the research. So yeah, I will always probably lean toward the book, with the caveat of, like what I was saying before, that it's very time consuming, right? So it's a bit of a gamble if you commit and it's an 8-hour book or 8-hour audio book. It's like if you commit and then you find out halfway through that it's absolute garbage, you know, that's obviously the risk that you're playing, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And it is so difficult. I mean, I think I've been referred to as a medium junkie. So, you know, just that breadth of knowledge and the different things that you get as an opportunity to read on Medium, I love, but I only flick. You know, it's the 30 minutes a day, flick, happy to do that stuff. But I think favourite podcasts, do you have a couple? Obviously, I love the IdeaCast as well.
Yep. Yeah, so the HBR, like top by far. The other ones are kind of like niche ones in the accounting space. And honestly, they're less about content and they're more about people. So there's one in New York called the Green Apple Podcast.
Yes.
Shout out if you're listening. That he interviews accountants who've got something going on in their life outside of accounting. Yep. So accountants with hobbies, right? Yep. So it's like you may be an athlete or a musician or something like that. So they talk about what's going on in the accounting profession all around the world, but then they're like, what finishes the picture for you? And I find that, fascinating. So yeah, that's probably another favorite. Now that I'm thinking about it, a lot of the podcasts that I listen to are really interview style and probably more about people's stories. And that makes sense why, obviously, I'm drawn toward the accounting side than sort of the technical stuff. So in terms of technical podcasts, HBR, Ideacast is like number one. Stanford have one as well, which I'll catch intermittently. And then the other one, Tim Ferriss's, is obviously a good one. But yeah, the rest are actually all accounting. So Heather Smith.
Yep.
I can't remember. Do you know Cloud Stories?
Cloud Stories.
Yep. The 0 Hour podcast was a huge fan of.
Yep.
And then the Green Apple podcast. And then there were a couple other ones in America, accounting specific, but they were all sort of interview style. So that's interesting.
It's amazing how much you learn from the likes of Tim Ferriss when he's interviewing, all sorts of random people. And, it just feeds the amount of documentaries that I think I've now watched just from Tim Ferriss or Lewis Howes' School of Greatness podcast. Yep. The other night at our house was the Wim Hof documentary on his weird breathing and getting your body to do all of these wonderful things. And learning in general and learning as a whole just makes you such a better person in that your mind is opened, you aren't closed to what's actually going on. You can obviously have an opinion on whether something is, good or bad or seems to sit well with you, but just listening to other people's stories, getting that inspiration, but also getting that challenge. I absolutely love that challenge to go, okay, well, I was closed off to a little bit of that thinking and these guys are out here doing this amazing stuff. I'm just shit. I'm going to have to do better. Yeah.
Well, it's funny you should mention that as well, because I've actually been reading in terms of what's happening in the United States at the moment. Obviously, we've got business interests over there. And I've kind of just been watching from afar, but really what I was curious about was understanding sort of both sides of the coin in terms of the arguments that the right are making and then the arguments that the left are making, and actually trying to understand sort of why people feel and think that way. And I've actually found a fascinating process, because it's kind of well, you guys are both right in your own different ways, and it would be very nice if you could just kind of agree to disagree. I found that process. I mean, I'm not one to get drawn into political arguments or anything like that. So I think just objectively, reading up and listening and talking to people, that feel strongly one way or the other, has been a very interesting process for me.
Definitely. It's just so exciting to learn what's going on outside the world. And unless you're dealing with, just one type of client, you have to understand some of these things to understand what they're going through, what their teams are going through, what's happening for their customers. And I think this is the exciting part about being an accountant, right? It's so much more than understanding a debit or credit or understanding how to apply some tax legislation, because we literally are a partner for every single one of our clients, which is super exciting.
Yeah, I say best friend in business, right?
That's an awesome one. Totally agree. Now, you mentioned at the beginning of your article that you actually audit yourself, which for me is, I was clapping. I was so excited. I was like, yay, because I've been called a weirdo by quite a few accountants over the years, because I have a routine where at the end of every single day, I'm actually reviewing what happened in the day. What was good, what was bad, what would I change, where are the improvements coming from, what needs to change tomorrow, who did these great things, how to capitalize on that. And I just find that process, it's so invigorating. It's so amazing, because we're all so busy, and I can go back and I can review and go, okay, well, January I got 3 out of 10, 7. Oh, that was a good day. Let's replicate.
Yeah.
Tell me how you audit yourself.
So probably in a similar fashion that you do, and a similar fashion that the accounting profession does, in the sense that I like you, I've got the daily, I've got the weekly, I've got the monthly and the quarterly, and then the annual. Right, and then the 10 yearly. So I think the big thing is that the wider the sort of time frame, the heavier the level of decisions are. And then obviously my turn from 29 to 30 was a 10 yearly. And that was a big sort of zoom out and kind of look at the next 10 years. Because it's very difficult in that day-to-day, month-to-month sort of cycle to sort of get enough visibility, because you're only looking about next month or next quarter or next year even. Looking next decade, you go, whoa, there's some things here that need to actually change. So the process is probably very similar to yours in terms of keeping logs on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly, et cetera, and there was a period over sort of the new year, my birthday, which was 6th of January. So there was about 2 weeks between the 25th of December and to the 6th of January, where I was just all I was doing was introspection, and just kind of looking at the next decade. And that's where I realized that I'd made the mistake about going too deep on the business-centric books. And I've been talking to other people who are compulsive readers and sort of picking up this stuff. I think I referenced something by Mark Cottle, who I was visiting in November, I think. And he said this stuff, and I didn't actually take it in. Yeah, I obviously took it in, but banked it for later on. And then it was during that process of sort of introspection that I went, Mark said this thing to me like the month before, and it's like, actually, and then I obviously went back and tried to estimate how many hours I'd spent, obviously practicing in accounting, studying formally at university and stuff like that. And then obviously the self-initiated reading. And it's like, wow, I'd spent 30,000 hours over the last decade, basically, honing and practicing my craft. And, if you follow Malcolm Gladwell's outliers thing, it says all you need is 10,000 to be an expert. And it's like, wow, I think I went above and beyond. No wonder I'm getting a diminishing marginal return for every subsequent hour. And yeah, I suppose at the same time, there was all of this echo chamber sort of rhetoric bouncing around the internet. And I realized that I'd actually created my own echo chamber of business and accounting. And yeah, the most stimulated I'd been, because I looked back on the last 12 months of reading, what were my favorite books for that period. And it's like, these had nothing to do with accounting or business. And then I'm like, this is why, essentially. And then I wrote that blog.
Which is amazing. So where do you think you learned this literal review and audit of yourself? Has it been ingrained in you as something natural? Did you learn it in books? And probably more importantly, do you try and teach this to your team and your clients and everyone you're dealing with?
Yeah, so I think it was a natural evolution. I think I learned it from a number of different books over a series of time, because what I've noticed is that for me, the process has gotten better and better every single time. And I've taken a little bit from all of these different things. So it's definitely been a process. I don't remember where I first kind of learned it, but it was definitely in my very early 20s, dare I say 20 or 21, where it was just simply a matter of hey, set goals, set milestones, et cetera, et cetera. I wish I could pull up some of them. I think I've got some stuff dating back to 2006, which was super cute because my goal was to earn $60,000 a year, So yeah, I think it's been a process. It's something that I have been doing for about 10 years now. And it is absolutely something that we distill to the rest of the team and also to our clients as well. But I suppose my challenge is about like finding what is the best practice methodology for all of this sort of stuff. Because particularly in the personal development discipline, a lot of this stuff is hyperbole and anecdotal, and I'm definitely a math and science type of dude. So I'm looking for like, yeah, that's nice, but where is your controlled experiment? Where is your peer review? All of this is nice, but I need some evidence. So I'm very sort of skeptical about sort of stuff that I read in that discipline that doesn't have the weight of sort of peer review behind it. So I'm reluctant to sort of read something and then throw it out to the rest of the group prior to it being sort of vetted, unless I've kind of experimented on it myself.
Yeah. In terms of learning styles and stuff for the team as well, you touched on before, you're an audio person.
Yep.
How do you combat that with a team that is all going to be learning differently? Do you guys have, separate kind of learning schedules and learning things, or what do you do?
It's actually really funny you should ask that, because we had a training thing on Friday. We try our best to actually make the training multimodal so that it can actually satisfy sort of everyone. But I said, I chimed in at the end of that session, it's like, eventually we'll be at the size where we can actually run like different channels, like learning channels for the same content. So it's like in the morning is the audio class, at lunchtime is the read write class, and in the afternoon is like the practical kinesthetic class. But obviously with the team size as it is, we can't kind of justify that yet. So we kind of supplement just by making the learning material or the supplementary material multimodal. And then obviously all of the online content that we build in terms of internal team training is multimodal as well. So that's how we address it sort of in the short term. But the first thing is just about the self-awareness of which channel you learn best by. So new staff, we will actually put through before like they're even onboarded, go through like this battery of like tests and assessments, one of which is there's actually two different learning tests. One is I think it's called the 7 intelligences, and then the other one is called the BARC test, which is visual, audio, reading, kinesthetic. And then that basically spits out these percentages and ratios and that sort of thing to not just help us understand best how to sort of train them, but also help them to understand how they best learn.
What do you do with clients in this aspect as well? Because I mean, it's been such traditional that, you just sit down with clients and have a conversation, or you might kind of show them a little report or something. Are you working backwards for how your clients learn as well?
Yeah, look, it would be nice if we could sort of put clients through this battery of testing before they actually came on board. We're obviously not at the moment. The best we're trying to do is just try and guess. So people give away clues about learning modalities sort of in conversation and that sort of thing. So you've just got to tune in very carefully, but they'll say things like, do you hear what I'm saying? Or can you see? Yeah, et cetera, So you're just kind of trying to tune in for those keywords there. But then also tuning in like to body language and behaviors that can also be like tells, if you would, to learning modalities. But then trying to train the team on that as well is like a huge saga. So we haven't really addressed that at the moment. I suspect when we do like build more on our client side learning modalities, I think we will kind of make it part and parcel as to getting access to this material is complete like a learning modalities test, or we even just have a course on learning modalities, preface with why this is important for you and your business.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such an amazing difference when you understand how people operate and why they're operating like that. How important do you think it is for leaders of accounting businesses to really have this skill set where they are leaders, they're true leaders who understand people, who are really, really interested in understanding people and are really interested in understanding themselves and how the whole entire thing operates together?
Yeah, look, I've been having these conversations around like at an academic level about what is the accounting curriculum look like for 21st century and onward. And you'd probably be on the same wavelength where it's like the debit credit stuff is like really a small part of the equation. I think, counseling psychology elements need to actually be blended into it because, a lot of time as an accountant is actually spent counseling, listening, reflecting back, et cetera, et cetera. And I definitely know that my studies in that area have all been very useful. And then obviously if you want to be a good, counselor or practitioner, you have to have that sort of level of self-awareness and introspection before you can obviously go out and start sort of, helping clients in that respect. So I think, that psychology field is very important in the accounting space. I think that the technology piece is obviously a huge component, and it's just going to become bigger and bigger. And that's not about, like, I'm not saying every accountant needs to go out and, get a software engineering degree. I'm saying about sophisticated end user, right? So a very thorough understanding of business information systems, about analytics and, just the flow of data, basically. You don't need to actually be the one that builds the software. There's plenty of people that can do that. So yeah, the psychology, the technology piece, and then I think the business generalist piece as well, where you don't have to be an expert in marketing or an expert in HR, but have enough of a working understanding so that you can maybe diagnose problems or identify problems and make the appropriate referrals. Like, the reality is that I draw a comparison of your average accountant to a general practitioner, a GP, right? And a GP has to be good at all things in medicine so that they can make the preliminary diagnosis and then refer appropriately from there. And I think that's the role of the accountant as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I term that the full stack employee, and, it was stolen from a wonderful LinkedIn article. I'll put that up as well. But, we have this amazing opportunity to completely shape and change business owners and businesses' lives. And we're at the front seat, which is just so exciting and so amazing.
Yeah.
And, it's all reliant and determined on how much we want to push ourselves and how far we want to take our businesses and how passionate we are about the fact that this is our job.
Yeah.
This is what we signed up for. And, this is our responsibility as accountants to make sure, that we are taking the reins and moving these businesses in whatever way they actually want to as well. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. So on that note, I'm going to order you a t-shirt that says, "I am a knowledge junkie."
All right,
anyone listening to this who would also like to proudly wear a t-shirt saying "I am a knowledge junkie," let me know and I'll get some ordered for you. But I want to thank you so much for your time today. You are an exceptionally busy person who just fits in so much stuff. Anyone in the accounting industry who's looking for someone to challenge them and to really set the bar, you are definitely the man for that job.
Cheers, Steph. It's been
wonderful.
Fun.
Excellent. Talk soon.
Cool. See ya.
Bye.